And welcome everyone to another edition of the Spoiler Room. It's the Family That Slays Together month. So glad you could join us tonight as we continue to look at weird, quirky, homicidal, twisted families in horror. And tonight we got a very interesting one for you on deck. It is Parents from 1989. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and cracking your favorite drink. I got me some mudslide tonight to talk about movie spoilers. And the crew with me to talk about this very interesting Randy Quaid horror comedy is, first off, she's back with us once again from the horror retrospective. It is Kara. Hello, Kara. How are you?
Hello. Doing all right.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Glad to have you in the room tonight. And of course, the man who just he like keeps coming back. I think he's starting to, he's a masochist or something, but we always love having him in the room. It is none other than Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm great. I'm gonna put the kiss in masochist tonight. I'm doing great. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of this. This is the first time I'd watched this movie, as with so many other films we discuss on the show. And I was not prepared for Parents, so this will be good. I'm not setting that up to say, oh, I hated this movie. It's not gonna be a rant. I think for me personally, we're closing out Family That Slays Together month much stronger than we started. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, well, you haven't watched Head of the Family yet from Full Moon, but anyway.
Oh,
that's right. We're not out of the woods yet, are we?
We're not out of the woods yet. We got one more.
I keep thinking the tongue singing that one.
I can't wait. Kara, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind giving the synopsis, if you could, of Parents from 1989?
It's definitely a quirky, not your usual. I don't know if you would say it's set in the 50s type film. You've got the fun, not stuck up Quaid brother, and you realize this is not your usual family. Definitely, it puts a whole spin on we kind of like that dark spin on, well, not those good old days films, but they really take it to a whole different extreme, and we realize this film has a darker secret than usual.
Yeah, it does. And I love that it's set in the backdrop of the 50s. And man, my wife actually sat down and watched this with me. This was, in all honesty, a first watch for me as well.
Oh, wow.
I picked it because I was looking for different family movies that didn't have the Sawyers in it, which is harder than you think. But I picked this one because Randy Quaid, and I'd seen it has a great video cover on the video shelves back in the day. It had a great cover of the mom, and I think there's a meat on the table or a leg, and the kids there, and Randy Quaid's in the back, coming out of the refrigerator. And it's the poster on the on IMDb, and it said there's a new name for terror, and I just remember that. I remember that picture on the video case, and I just never got around to renting it. Now I'm kicking myself for not renting it because it's a quirky. This is such an unusual film, and not in a bad way. My wife was sitting there watching this with me. She goes, "Why am I sitting here watching this with you?" She's like, this normally isn't my movie. She's like, but it is so visually engrossing. She's like, I can't look away. And we want to buy that house, just like it is. The Art Deco 50s house. Loved that house.
Indeed.
Ian, what about you with this? Your initial reaction while watching this?
It's such a weird movie. First of all, I didn't realize it was directed by Bob Balaban, who is a fantastic character actor. He's been in a bunch of things. The first time I'd seen him was, I think, in some Christopher Guest movies, but he's been everything from Gosford Park to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's one of those, you see him, you know him guys. And it turns out he's also from Chicago. and his birthday was last week. So happy birthday, Mr. Balaban. It it kind of has that Tim Burton style, kind of an idea that obsession with the 1950s, with kind of pop culture and the things that are going on behind the perfect facade of the the white bread American family. I kind of figured that it was all going to be real, but there was a part of me that was really hoping that Balaban would stick the landing of making us believe that perhaps this was all in the little boy's mind. Because I think
it does lead you that way.
I think even it was either the IMDb synopsis or some other synopsis I'd read online with the whole idea of like a little boy suspects his parents might be cannibals instead of a little boy discovers that his parents are cannibals, which leaves that door open, like,
right.
And especially up until the third act, pretty much they walk that line where he could be imagining things. Even the scene that you think is the most obvious, where he walks on his parents having sex, or doing something. It's sort of an allegory for them having sex. They've got like kind of like red streaked lips, but that could have very well just been, her lipstick, that bright red, lipstick kind of smear on their face. But we come to find out, of course, that it was, human blood. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. I think visually it's fantastic. It's one of those things I wish like the Music Box or one of these other kind of like art house or revival theaters would show it somewhere, because I would pay to see this on the big screen. It's just so lush. And it reminds me of some of the other movies we've talked about earlier this month. There's some thematic stuff going on. There are people under the stairs. There is with the Nicolas Cage movie that we watched, like a Mom and Dad, from a couple of weeks ago. They have that wacky kind of opening credit sequence. Here it's an end credit sequence that I think does right what Mom and Dad didn't quite do right, which is it committed to a particular genre. And also, in closing, because I know this is hey, what do you think? And 45 minutes later, I get to the point. Speaking of Nicolas Cage, Randy Quaid, if they were to remake Parents, this would be a Nicolas Cage role.
Oh God, yeah. he would definitely fit that role very well. I want to see that. I want to see that remake now.
There you go.
What about you, Kara, and your initial thoughts with Parents?
I loved this. This is my second time watching it. The first time I watched it 8 years ago, I remember walking through the video store and seeing the cover, and it always struck me as unusual. Like, why is this in the horror film section? It looks so normal, and I always passed it up. I didn't quite get it, and I'm glad I eventually did watch it. And I like the subtlety of, they don't really throw it in your face that they're cannibals, but I like they always have this really red juicy meat on the table. Like, why is their food so gory?
Oh yeah, like the giant piles of ribs or whatever that are on the grill that they're serving up. It's cartoonish, yeah.
Well, it's usually ribs. They're having ribs, and I loved how they always played it off too. The parents were like, "Oh, those were leftovers in the fridge from the previous owner, and those were leftovers." And then the kid, the one time, he's like,
"Yeah,
how many leftovers are in there?" He's like, "We have an awful lot of leftovers, Mom and Dad." And and yeah, I liked it. It is. I like quirky movies like this, and that play with that. First off, the whole turning the dark side to suburbia is always fun. Like you said, Ian, I think Tim Burton does it well. Go ahead, Car. What are you gonna say?
No, I was half thinking there was a more recent film, like not a cannibal film, but I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of Fido, where it kind of plays with like that 50s. Yeah. I thought that was really good too. Very well done, and it's also kind of quirky.
I haven't seen that in probably 15 years, but yeah, Peter Connolly, oh, so good.
This would definitely pair well with Fido in that same type of that 50s style, but you've got the darker side to it. That one's a little bit more satirical than this one, moves a little bit more subtly. It's But yeah, those are both in the same vein. I love Fido too. I'm a huge fan of that film. When I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be when I watched that one, I'm like, oh, I love this. You know, there's
Billy Connolly. Sorry,
Billy Connolly. Yes,
yeah.
Billy Connolly. Excellent comedic actor. I've got his first U.S. comedy performance on VHS that recorded Whoopi Goldberg presents Billy Connolly when she brought him over. I got that from HBO back in the day.
Nice.
Yeah, I still got that on VHS. We got Infobon in here, and he goes, would this be regarded as Vestron's most offbeat offerings? Probably a redundant question. Vestron Video did put out some odd films. This is probably one of their more unusual films. Just more unusual films for late 80s in general, especially with the cast they have. You know, they have a few names in here. You know, for me, and I want to get your guys' opinion, they introduce a actor, the young actor, Brian Medorsky, who plays the son. I loved this kid. Scared. My wife was like, how did they get him not to smile like nearly through the entire film? But I thought, especially for this, like the fact that he's, you know, kind of a co-star, it carries on his shoulders a bit. I thought he did well. What'd you think, Cara?
He carries it well. I like how he looks very gaunt, very mortified. I love how they play it up where he looks like he's terrified of Randy Quaid. It kind of looks like Randy Quaid is stalking him midway through the film. And I know, especially some of us who have like those overbearing fathers, it's like some of us actually are afraid of our dad, even though we know he's not going to hurt us. But in this situation, they really do he does look menacing.
Well, it is Randy Quaid. He looks menacing in general, but no, just kidding.
Well, I don't know. National Lampoon, he's kooky, but I don't think he would hurt anybody.
Shitter's full. But Ian, what about you and our young Michael?
He does a really good job, but one of the things that kind of added to the atmosphere of this movie is I paused it. I looked him up because I don't know this actor. This was the only film he did.
Wow.
And so I don't know if he decided acting wasn't for him. I don't know if he died. I don't know if Randy Quaid freaked him out or something.
Freaked him out.
But it's just, it is one of those things where you're watching it and he doesn't have that child star, that child actor thing. He just seems very naturalistic. But I mean, I could see some of the stuff being traumatic to shoot or even just to watch.
What it reminded me of a bit of, not in a comedic way, but kind of almost like a horror or thriller equivalent, horror film type equivalent of almost Napoleon Dynamite, to where, you know, he's not like that, like comedic, but in that same vein, to where everything he reacts to pretty much similarly to everything, you know, except for maybe his nightmares. But even those too, when he wakes up in that, he's just like, you know, he's not like sweaty sheets or anything. He just wakes up.
Well, it's, you do have to wonder, because they move into this house because, you know, dad got a new job or whatever. I think it's called Toxico or something.
Toxico.
Yeah, I love that.
But it's not like they moved into this place and he suddenly discovered that his parents are weird and possibly cannibals. I mean, he's like probably 10 years old or something. So that he's kind of got this disaffected kind of like dissociative quality to him, probably because he's grown up in this family. He's been traumatized and never quite taken to the idea of that. Yeah, it's okay. It's normal to eat people.
Yeah. Well, you know, he doesn't. This is where he quite confirms, but you feel that even going into this film at the start, he's already suspected his family. You know, like you said, this has been going on for a while. This is like new at the new house. They've been eating people for a while, and we all know that you can go a little crazy if you eat people.
A little bit.
Well, that's what they say anyway. I haven't eaten a person. Okay, I ate a toe. Okay, I ate a toe. No, just sorry. That's sorry. That's Cannibal the Musical reference. Sorry.
Oh,
anyway,
ain't got much meat on it. No.
But yeah, you're right. And it's sad that he didn't do anything else, because I really like this kid in here, because he kind of helps you. His non-reaction helps ground a few things of this wacky world he lives in. To where, because you got goofy Randy Quaid in here, and you've got the overzealous 50s mom. So you've got him who's kind of indifferent to all of this suburbia 50s world. And I think that helps with the audience ground you a bit, so it doesn't quite get as goofy as it could. Even with a film, you've got the company named Toxico, right? And normally, like a satire stuff, you'd be like, oh, but then you realize, no, that company, they're making a defoliant that wipes out an entire forest. And they like this idea.
Well, I mean, because the way he's talking about that, the dad is talking to his boss about it, is it will basically, kill. Was it say drop it on foreign countries to deforest them? It's called catalyzed resin. In 48 hours, this jungle will be mulch. And you think about, this is the 1950s. You're thinking Korea. You're thinking eventually, Vietnam. All these kind of weapons applications. They've got like miniature jungles that they're models of it. It's some dark stuff in there.
It's dark, and while it's satirical, it's really dark satire. I mean, it's like borderline reality of sorts. And the dad, you can see why the kid's scared of him. Cara, what'd you think of this? Do you think even with some of the goofy stuff, it's still it like doesn't quite get like Pee Wee Herman type goofy or whatnot? You know what I'm saying? That big top Pee Wee type ridiculousness.
No, I mean it's not over the top. I kind of viewed it as a black comedy, but it plays it straight. It doesn't go overboard. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It kind of balances itself out quite nicely. It just walks that line, which a lot of things seem to struggle with. Like I think they played it off fairly well.
Yeah, they do, and a lot of it does hinge on Michael. I mean, I honestly think, especially when they go over to the boss's house, because he's got to have the important 50s dinner with the boss. We've seen that before. I've never had dinner with, my boss is a friend of mine, so I've had dinner with him, but usually like in a situation like that, no, I've never gone over to my boss's house to have steak for dinner.
Oh, I loved that thing with the Chex Mix where the woman's like, "Oh, this stuff is so wonderful." I'm like, "What?"
Hey, Chex Mix is wonderful.
Yeah, that was a great reaction of, wait, where'd you get this recipe? Would you believe from the side of a Chex box? Oh my God. And they go on that conversation. The two guys are sitting there going, and then the wife, who's the mom, Lily, she just goes, oh, pair of threes, because they're playing was it gin? I think that's what they were playing, or bridge. I don't know. I'm not.
I don't know my cards.
I don't remember my cards too much. But in any case, even that was an interesting, rather awkward conversation, because the husbands are kind of talking business and the wives aren't, and the wives are drinking the Long Island iced tea.
Well, it adds, there's a layer to it, because on his what was it, the little boy's name?
Michael,
yeah. On his first day of school, he's the new student. He meets Sheila, who is the daughter of the boss's daughter,
right?
And she got held. He asked Leah, "Why do you look so much older than the other kids?" And she said, "I got held back a year for doing things."
Yeah.
And she's got this uncomfortable relationship with her parents, and she's always talking about this, really weird stuff like, I'm from the moon. And she definitely is always trying to escape her reality, or projecting this kind of fantasy world onto Michael. And you just wonder, is she covering up like parental abuse? Which, the whole idea of like, great, the parents are getting together, the kids can hang out at the house, but it's not exactly a safe and warm environment. And yet you've got this friendly card game and all this banter and stuff, and alcohol flowing. There's some sinister stuff going on there. And the movie doesn't really become about that, but it's just there, kind of like dangling as a thread to think about among the other all the other messed up stuff that happens.
Yeah.
It's what'd you think of that relationship between Michael and Millie, Cara? That it was an odd one.
It really is weird, and I mean, it does kind of
I'm
feel
sorry.
implied.
Sorry, it wasn't Millie, it was Sheila. My apologies. Sorry,
Sheila.
go ahead. Yeah.
Millie made sense to me. It's still
Millie.
one of those waspy names.
Well, there's a Millie and a Lily in this movie. Yeah.
Sorry,
Cara, go ahead. I apologize. I made a mistake. It was Sheila.
No, I mean, it still made sense to me. Like I mean, I know parents, it was a different time. They would actually teach kids to go and mix drinks for the parents. And the little girl gave this drink recipe on her first day of school. And then there was that whole thing of, I know Michael was too young to really think about it a certain way, but he's looking up at her at the tree, and he's looking up at her dress, and not necessarily on purpose. And then there's the scene where she has him take off his shirt and crawl into the freezer with him. And it's like, why are you guys doing all this weird stuff?
Well, and she's kind of initiating this, which I think leads to the unspoken thing of there's something quirky and possibly wrong in her family, because she's her dynamic with her parents, because like you said, everything she does involving Michael feels deliberate, not in a
somewhere,
right, not in a malicious way, but just like you said, she's up in the tree on purpose, and not necessarily standing in the tree like you would maybe expect she, like you said, you could easily just walk under, and Michael ends up looking up, and he doesn't have those thoughts, but it feels like almost she's sat that way on purpose. And just like later, she ends up getting the wine from the cellar, and they end up having some wine, and she hides in the freezer with the meat, not knowing what it is. And she asks Michael to take his shirt off. And it's just this weird dynamic between these two too, which makes you wonder what's going on in her family, because her mom acts a little weird too, played wonderfully by Deborah Rush.
Well, she even makes this weird comment about them running away and being husband and wife, and she'll cook dinner, but she's she's throwing raw eggs in a blender and throwing celery down a disposal. And I'm like, you're a great cook.
Yeah, but it also shows you that Michael's not the only kid, unfortunately, that might not necessarily
dysfunctional.
Right.
There's a great, and this is, I think, the thing that really hooked me into this movie. There's a really great scene, and I love the music in this too, but there's a bit where Michael, kind of in slow motion, takes off his shirt, and he gets a running start and jumps in slow motion onto his bed. And he immediately starts to sink into the sheets, and you realize that like beneath the sheets is blood, and the blood starts coming up, and he gets completely subsumed by it. It begins swirling around as this slow motion, surreal, bombastic music thing that eventually transitions into like a bowl of tomato soup. I'm like, it's not scary, it's off-putting, and it's not funny. Like, a lot of this movie is not funny. It's disturbing because it's presented as if it's supposed to be funny, but it's kind of like Rodney Dangerfield's character in Natural Born Killers. The sexually abusive dad who's in the family sitcom, but you're watching it like, no, this is the darkest shit I've ever seen.
I thought you were going to say Ladybugs.
That is the darkest shit I've ever seen. Sorry, thank you for setting me straight there. Fucking ladybugs.
Wow, ladybugs. Wow.
What is it, making your stepson wear a dress?
Yeah, it's a deep cut. Well, and then there's that dynamic between the dad Nick and his wife Lily, because when we finally discover that yes, they are cannibals, and while they have been borrowing from the body donations to science, the fresh ones, they aren't above killing people. You know, he drops the line, well, your mom gained a taste for it. And, you know, you look at the mom and she's smiling in that, but I wonder how much of it is her going along with it, if she actually does enjoy it. I mean, well, later on, I guess we do see the scene where they're making love on entrails. So I guess there is where she does like it, but you know, how much of that was the dad influence on her, you know, forcing the subject, maybe like he was trying to do with his son, but his son not having any part of eating people.
It's hard to say. I mean, but there's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on.
Well, when she goes to talk to the school guidance counselor, Ms. Dew, she asks Lily, like, tell me about your husband's relationship with your son. What do they like to do together? And she's like, oh, they do things all the time. Like what? Oh, they just do so many things. And you realize that she's trying to cover up for the fact that, like, this perfect smiling family, they don't know each other. They don't really care beyond
interact. Yeah.
Right. And it's just, again, like the best movies, you could take the otherness, the supernatural or horror element out of it and still just be with characters that you'd watch just regularly going about their lives. And I think that's the case here.
Yeah,
like they don't have to be cannibals. They just have this really great dysfunctional relationship that's fascinating to watch how they try and cover it up to the outside world.
Well, yeah, and I mean, even in their household, they try to cover it up. You know, they try to get the son to eat and be, you know, the mom's happy and she's the happy homemaker, and the dad, you know, is Randy Quaid.
It makes you question, like, is she actually happy, or is that part of the facade? Like, because are they actually happy? Do any of them actually like each other, or are they all pretending with themselves? Do they even know each other or anything about each other? It's kind of creepy in itself if you put more thought into it.
Well, it also gets back to I referenced the people under the stairs. There's a line later on when everything kind of goes to hell where Nick says to Lily, he says, we'll make another one, Lily. We'll bring him up right. So they realize that they've got in their minds kind of a defective kid who still hasn't gotten with the program, and now he's causing trouble for all of them. If they just, throw him away like meat scraps, they can, raise another calf, and this one will maybe come out the way that they want him to.
Well, and and the dad, Nick, has just so much hostility towards his son, and at one point he just comes right out. I'm like, I'm a dad, and I'm just like, holy balls, when he comes out and just tells his son he doesn't like him. He doesn't like him at all. He's like, and I'm just like, whoa, and I think it not only it hurts, but I think that's where, as much as it is about a family who eats people, cannibals, and with the kid who's vegan, because they make a shit about how he doesn't eat any of the meat ever. He only eats the vegetables. But the way they have this whole dynamic of I just lost my thought now. I blew away. It went away. Damn it. It was right there. With this dynamic that they have, it really makes you wonder. And he even drops the line until you get to the end with the grandparents, the very end. He even drops the line on how he doesn't even look like him or sound like him or act like him. I almost thought it was a bit implied of maybe that wasn't his actual kid.
Like he was either adopted or kidnapped or something, or
well, he does resemble the woman, so I mean, I don't know, maybe she stepped out on him.
Well, see, that's what and again, it's very brief and it's underlined, but it would just have me thinking of maybe because it is the 50s too, they don't talk about it, but maybe Nick has a suspicion, maybe because of the way the kid acts, that it might not be his, but he won't come out and say it because he's not at all sure. But you do hear stories of the when the kid's not the dad of the families, there is usually hostility. So I'm just wondering if maybe it's implied a little bit that maybe she did step out, or it wasn't his kid, or he maybe married into the family and she had the kid, but when the kid was a baby, I just was wondering.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. I mean, yeah, like with this, there's so much that you can interpret that it kind of makes it fun. It's a fun movie to watch, even though it's not, it's not light and breezy, but it's
demented.
inventive. Yeah, it is demented. It's demented and inventive, which I really appreciate.
There's dementive.
Dementive.
I like that. Dementive. Copyright horror retrospective and the spoiler room. Dementive is a new term. I like that.
T-shirts available next week.
There you go.
With Randy Quaid's face on it.
With Randy's face. He won't mind. He probably won't notice at all.
I did want to mention, I know Ian brought it up briefly, but I loved the dream sequences. Like, they were very artistic, kind of like very tastefully done. I don't know if either of you got the impression, like there was one with an eye close up, and it kind of reminded me of the Paradine case. I don't know if that was a deliberate Alfred Hitchcock reference.
It might have been. There seemed to be other influences in these dream sequences. I mean, they had kind of, well, Ian does his Italian Giallo show, but some of the dream sequences had a bit of an Italian influence feel to them.
Yeah, I mean, as I don't want to say freakish, but very unusual. But I mean, some of them were, at least in my opinion, very beautifully done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene where Michael's running in slow motion and in black and white, and you kind of cross-cut that with his parents screaming. You've got that surreal bit where he's hiding in the pantry watching his mom make meatloaf, and all of a sudden these snake sausages kind of come to life, and he's not really freaked out by it. He's just sort of being consumed by these things, and then she opens up the pantry and kind of snaps out of it. But yeah, you're right. There is the fantasy stuff in this movie, I think, is something else that sets it apart. Yeah, again, I want to see this on the big screen so bad.
and they play with the colors in the dream sequences to let you know soon enough that you're in the dream sequence. So if it seemed like a regular moment, it kind of goes black and white, and then they play with the color a bit. Like, there's the one where it did go black and white when he was remembering what he walked in on his parents on, and then when he was running, it went to like all red color where he was running, and it was almost like a drawing back to his bed. And then it just, the dream sequences, like my wife said, it's not quite her film, but visually she couldn't. I mean, even some of the stuff that even the basic stuff, like the kid, Sheila says, "What does your dad actually do?" Which is kind of a question we've heard in other 50s shows or whatnot. It's never really addressed. The family is not always quite sure what dad does for job. He just goes to work. So, Michael sneaks into his dad's company, and he happens to be in the morgue when his dad shows up. And just the way this whole sequence was shot was a rather tension-filled and interesting, though. You don't see what I find most interesting is it's about cannibals, and you're about cutting into people. We don't actually see them cut into people like heavily, like they start to, but nothing like you actually see the insides of someone or anything. It always is a camera angle looking up at Quaid or whoever's cutting into the body.
Yeah, and even in that, Michael sneaks into the Division of Human Testing, which is that kind of morgue area, and he sees his father talking to like a technician it's like he's at a butcher shop, like, I want this and this and leave out this part this time and, make sure it's fresh or whatever. But yeah, Yeah, but it doesn't get graphic because just the absurdity and the eeriness of what we're seeing is enough. The theme carries the picture instead of the gross out stuff.
Well, I think it's I get the impression they were kind of going for tasteful.
No pun intended.
No, I didn't even catch that as I said it.
Well, it's the type of film I like because it plays with your imagination. It gives you enough so that you've got the coherent story, so you know what it's implying. But at the same time, it's giving you enough for your brain, and it's adding some layers to it just for you thinking of. And like Ian said at the beginning of the show, it plays a little bit like, well, is this the kid's imagination or not? Because the kid's quirky. He could just be, going through a tough phase.
Food for thought.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, that one was on purpose.
Well, and then towards the end, for just a minute, I think they wanted us to wonder if the parents were innocent and Michael was the one who was committing all these crimes.
Oh, yeah.
Because, Ms. Dew comes over to the house and she goes down to the basement and they find a body. And there's this great sequence where she screams and it like kind of pans out of or maybe I can't remember if it was her screaming or was it the body?
No, it was her. The body touched her and she's screaming for a very long time and they go through the vent.
Yes. They go up and out the house. And then she ends up eventually hiding in the pantry and there's like stabbing through the slats. And when she gets out, there's I think it's like the golf club comes swinging out and it's at a low angle. And so you're like, oh, wait a second. Is this like a young Michael Myers situation? Has the kid been the psychopath the entire time? But, when he comes to, going back to like the kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre homage, he's, tied up at a dinner table, but the invention or the dimension or the dementiveness comes into play. It's on this tremendous rotating set where he's having this conversation with his parents. And I'm just like, what am I even watching? How do they film this scene without, throwing up all over themselves?
It's an amazing scene because you realize it's all practical where they've got a camera mounted on basically like a Lazy Susan type set. And he's talking to the kid the whole time and it's spinning. You're like, wow. But that's just one of the many visual things in this film that keeps you just watching, if nothing else. You're just like, from the Art Deco to everything. It's hard to believe this was made in 89. In all honesty, they really capture the period and they really do some visually wild things in here. We got a few comments from Robert Baum. He said, what about Charlie Sheen in Quaid's role? I'm not sure. I think Charlie Sheen could quite get that level of crazy. I mean, he can be crazy, but I think you need the Nick Cage level.
Yeah, because Nick Cage because honestly, he wouldn't have to calibrate or do anything except just mimic what Randy Quaid is doing. Because I swear to God, this incarnation of Randy Quaid is what Nick Cage has been doing for the last 10 years, with a couple of exceptions, like Pig.
And Infobomb also says, I don't know what's more unsettling for Vestron, this or Ken Russell's The Lair of the White Worm. That's a hard.
I've never seen Lair of the White Worm. That's on my list. I should have fixed that.
Lair of the White Worm is a little bit out there as well. I think they're different sort of disturbing. But yeah, it's definitely in that same ballpark. Actually, Lair of the White Worm may or may not come up as a horror of 1988 film in the future. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. Infobob also says, speaking of Tim Burton, he was once considered to direct After Hours, which later became a Scorsese effort. That'd be interesting to see him take that film.
I take it that wasn't an amusement park movie.
No, that wasn't. No?
It was real cinema.
It was real cinema, yes. And then Mary Beth Hurt is married to Paul Schrader, so she's probably up on Demented Fare.
Wow.
Wow. Whoo. Dropping the bombs, info bomb.
I never imagined Paul Schrader being married. That's a reality show I definitely tune into.
That would be. Wow. What I actually the idea that actually flew away from my head before is the fact that I think the dysfunction in this family, and not necessarily playing. I mean, we do get that they're officially cannibals later on, but even the playing at, if they're not, they're just this weird dysfunctional family. I think there's a lot of horror just in that, just in their dysfunction that they have, not only them, but in this world they live in, because they're not the only family that's quirky. And I think that's where some of the horror in this film is effective, is the fact that this is an odd world, and this isn't fitting the happy 50s look that we are getting visually. So the aesthetic, you're getting that 50s happy vibe, but everything going on in this film is dark.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's effective. You know, and the like I said, there isn't a huge amount of gore in here, but there's a lot of meat show. And I think that works even more to its advantage.
It's not the kind of movie. I mean, this didn't turn me vegetarian, but it's close.
No, yeah. Me either. It made me hungry. But
every time I looked at those giant piles of ribs, I was like, well, I am hungry, but I also know where those came from, and I don't know if I want to eat ribs again.
Well, that's what was funny, is that dream sequence you said, where he was drowning in the red blood, and then it cuts to tomato sauce. When they pan away, the kid's actually got his hand in the sauce, and the mom doesn't say anything, but you find there's ribs in the sauce, and that he's dipping them wrong. And also the fact that there's a cookbook. It's actually in the thumbnail as well. My parents had that cookbook.
Oh yeah, I think it came with every house in like the 70s and the 80s.
It came with every house, handed down from the parents to the baby boomers. That checkerboard recipe book definitely was in a lot of households. And horror retrospectives having a little technical difficulties, but she put, maybe it's a play on how all families have a darkness. I could see that. I can see that being as another theme in here.
Oh yeah.
And just having the contrast with the other family, with the daughter who he befriends, who's weird as well. Just quirky, weird. She's unusual. What surprised me in this, as far as them having weird, having Michael be an outsider of sorts, or kind of odd, talking about what is it, decomposition or whatever it was he's talking about, or firebombing or something, whatever it was he brought up in class.
It was basically boiling a cat.
That's what it was,
in order to make himself invisible. Yeah,
that's right. You boil, if you eat the bones of a black cat that you boil, you can turn invisible. That's what he drops. And then the other new student, she's the one that talks about a martini made with an onion is called a Gibson.
That's right. Yeah, which I didn't know. I'm learning stuff.
You learned something, right? But what I thought was interesting in this film, that you almost would expect in almost every other film that has this, you have the quirky kids. I don't remember a scene of them being bullied, or even when they bring it up in class, you didn't have the kids getting poked fun at or whatever. They presented this, and I think that's what's even weirder, is they present these really odd and kind of disturbing things in class, and none of the other kids seem to be that affected by what they said.
That's true. I think there's but I think we kind of, almost to your point, Mark, we kind of expect to see that in movies like this. But this movie isn't really about that. It focuses more on these kids with their own kind of inner world versus the world of their parents. yeah, it would have made sense to have some kind of reaction from the other kids, whether it's bullying, whether it's making fun of them, like saying you're weird or something. But yeah, it zips right along. It shifts or keeps that focus on the kids and what they're experiencing, and not so much on the other kids. Yeah, but I think it would have tied in nicely to kind of cast them more as outsiders, like if they're getting picked on and the only ones they have is each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, they do mention that they're the only friends. She drops that he's, her only friend. Oh, she tells her mom, he's not my only friend. And then he goes out, you're my only friend. But at the same time, we don't get that after class scene. We don't get that after class scene where the kids are bullied or whatever because they said something weird. But what I kind of triggered me when I was watching it was, well, not trigger, but thinking about it was the other kids not having such a, exasperated or shocked expression for what the kids are bringing up. Makes you wonder, is everybody in suburbia actually got some dark family stuff going on? Because none of them seem to be affected by the weird guys. They don't hang out with them, but at the same time, they're just like, everyone in the class is just like, eh.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Or they could just say, well, that's so weird, we just ignore them,
I love it. Or a retrospective, she says it's kind of a reverse Pleasantville, more like a Dementedville.
Ooh, Dementedville.
I like that's a sequel to Pleasantville, is Dementedville. That would be what that show would be now if it was about the same thing. Only be streaming instead of a TV show. But anyway, so yeah, Parents is a film that, yeah, on the surface or whatnot, you might think, oh, it's about cannibal parents, but there's a lot going on in this film, not just visually, but just thematically and with the characters. It's like an onion, for lack of a better term. But I mean, there's a lot of layers to this film, I think.
Yeah, and what I thought was kind of interesting was, I don't know if this was a conscious thing or what, but the climax, was a bit of Hellraiser in there, where the parents are kind of pursuing their son, in the house because he's discovered all their secrets, and that's when we get the line about, well, maybe we'll make another one.
Yeah.
Mom ends up getting accidentally stabbed, and the dad, like, he's kind of upset about it, but kind of not, and she dies, and that's when he goes after the Michael and gets a
well, they die together.
Well, he gets no, because he gets the giant shelf, though, the wine shelf, like,
right.
falls on him,
Yeah,
right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Yes.
So they die, within like a couple minutes of each other. But it reminded me of the end of Hellraiser with Frank and Julia, where she ends up getting stabbed, and he says, "Nothing personal, babe."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, and that scene of the shelf falling over. I mean, I doubt that was Randy Quaid. It was probably a stunt person, but what a stunt! I mean, that looked like it could have actually killed somebody.
Yeah.
I was half thinking that he stabbed the mom on purpose, for her interfering and defending the little boy. And
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was intentional.
Yeah, she got her mama bear on.
Yeah, it was been a few days since I watched the movie, so I probably forgot that detail. No. So thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, she got her mama bear on, which again, it's hinted at, and that's what I like about this film as well, is because it's hinted at throughout this film that no matter how aggressive or kind of overbearing the father is, or pushy is with, like, hey, let's eat people, and the way their lifestyle should be, she still loves her son very much, and he's actually more important than the husband, which may be why the husband is also why Nick is also aggressive towards the kid, because he realizes the mom actually, I think, loves the son a little more than the dad in many ways. And that comes out in this climactic sequence, because the therapist gets killed and they make dinner out of her on the grill. But then the kid won't eat the meat, and that's where you get the conflict with dad and him, and the dad goes to attack the kid, and that's when mama gets her mama bear on, and she stabs dad in the back, like down his back.
That's right. Yeah.
Because he was attacking the kid. And that's when the dad turns around and goes, what'd you do? And she's got the knife, and then he turns the knife on her and stabs her in the heart. But that little exchange there has been building up because the mom does love the kid more than the husband. And that shows little glimpses throughout because she's always protecting the kid.
Yeah.
From the dad.
A mom, in my opinion, should love her child more than her husband. I mean, if you're always going to choose the husband over your child, there's something wrong with you.
I could see that. Yeah.
I mean, from a maternal standpoint, I mean, like, you shouldn't choose a spouse or significant other over your child. Like, your child, I mean, you carried that child, you nurtured that. You should look after it and care for it.
Well, if it's in danger, not just from a dad, but from anyone.
You should, look after it, take care of it.
I hope to never be in that situation to find out.
But,
well, just don't eat people.
I do like the humor in the situation and the parents. If you think about it, like, she stabs him in the back, so he's going to stab her in the heart. Very elementary school.
Yeah, it is by the numbers there. But I like that she came to the kid's defense. And and the wine cellar thing, it's like, wow, they're actually pulling that whole wine rack on top of dad.
He took himself out.
Yeah. And what I liked too at first is I thought they were going to ignore it because, again, this is the first time I watched it. I thought they were going to ignore it because during the fight he knocks out, and I go, "Is that the gas pipe?" But they didn't really cut back to it right away. Like, oh no, and never mind that the house it started on fire upstairs. So there's a fire upstairs. You've got dad knock the gas pipe while trying to get after the kid, and then I'm just like, well, are they going to play? Is that a gas pipe? Maybe it wasn't actually a gas pipe. Like, oh no, it's a gas pipe, and they blow up, and then we find the kid later, the bookend, with grandpa and grandma.
Yeah.
And I guess they leave the question out there. So I want to pose our final question tonight to my crew here. Carl, we'll start with you. Are grandma and grandpa cannibals?
I think it's implied, so I'm assuming that the kid went to stay with the paternal grandparents since dad turned mom onto cannibalism.
Well, and they mention how much he looks like his dad, and they've got a picture of the dad mom next to his bed. So yeah, you're right. I think those are the paternal grandparents. And they give him a sandwich at the end of the night full of meat.
Which is a weird bedtime snack.
That is a weird bedtime snack. With my kids, I don't think I ever said, "Hey, you know what? Let me just slice off a piece of roast here for you to take to bed with you with 2 pieces of bread."
This weird, gross, slimy, shiny, greasy meat.
With a cup of warm milk too. Now.
What about you, Ian? You think grandpa are cannibals?
Probably. I mean, that's yeah. There was a better way to do this ending. I mean, maybe I'm just looking at it. Maybe it was better in 1989. I don't know. But yeah, the sandwich was a weird touch. But I'm kind of expecting something like this. Like, it's not genetic, but it runs in the family.
Or does it?
Well, I think we're meant to believe that it does.
Right.
That's the thing. Is like the movie is such its own thing, leading right up to that little coda at the end. That I'm like, just shut it off after the house explodes.
Well, I almost thought they were going to end the credits there. I didn't expect the grandparent coda, and it almost feels like that was tagged on at the end. Makes me wonder if their original intention was just to leave it, the house blowing up, and then go to credits, kind of a la a 70s film where it ends. There you go.
Ending.
Just
maybe Michael lived, maybe he didn't.
It's the left ending of, and that would have been just as fitting with the way the rest of the film is.
I liked that touch with the I almost said the wrong thing, but I liked that touch with the grandparents. It kind of gives it that dark humor ending.
Yeah,
it does. But I think, my sticking point is the sandwich. Like it's
Yeah.
an odd detail, and it's also very obvious.
Yeah.
Maybe sneaks down for a midnight snack or something, opens up in
Right.
the fridge and there's like a foot in there or something, you know, just
Yeah.
sell it a different way. Because to me, I'm
Mhm.
like, you don't give a kid that. You give him, especially, you know, the 1950s, fine. Give him a cup of milk and a couple of cookies,
Yeah.
you know, next to his bed or something, but not a sandwich. You're gonna get flies if nothing else.
You are.
Yeah. And
And
a triple stack sandwich.
yeah, a triple stack sandwich. Though you know, that close up is just fitting for all the meat in here. And I think that helps add to the idea. Yes, it is cannibals, and you're seeing everything through the perspective of Michael, because all the meat in here, regardless of how they prepare it, looks unnatural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it even this basic ground beef, and she's making this meatloaf, this very huge meat.
Yeah.
It looks unnatural. The ribs are unnatural. Everything meat wise, like you said, Ian, is greasy and slimy, but it's got a weird color to it
It's
where, like,
exaggerated.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to where it telling the audience right away, yeah, there's something off with this meat. The kid's not just
Hmm.
yeah, you know, all the else is vegetables. You barely see them, like the lettuce or whatever. But when the meat's there, it's a weird red color, and it's slimy and glossy and unusual, and just I don't know if I eat it, though I eat McRibs, so you know.
Lose the meat, eat some leaves.
You had to bring up McRib too, Mark.
I did.
It's almost McRib season, I think.
Yeah,
Coming up soon.
although maybe that was a blooper. Was the term vegan used in 1950s?
I think they said vegetarian.
Oh,
I
he
think
said
vegan
vegetarian.
is-
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Vegetarian.
I think vegan is
Yep.
more recent.
Yeah. No, you're right. He said vegetarian. I was thinking, I think my brain automatically filled in vegan, but you're right. He says vegetarian. So, parents. Final thought on this, Ian, with parents.
I loved it.
Mhm.
I don't know how, I remember this movie being around in '89, but I don't think
Mhm.
it made much of
Mhm.
an impact. And I feel like it was probably something that was way too ahead of its time, which is weird to see because this is right in the Tim Burton zeitgeist.
Yeah.
You know, it was the year of Batman. It was the year before Edward Scissorhands. I feel like if this were to be rediscovered and re-put out like in kind of a revival house thing, you know, people might, it could become a hit today. I think people would appreciate it much more.
Yeah, I think they would get it a lot more, possibly even than when it first came out. I'm with you there. Cara, what's your final thought with parents?
I think it's great. I think anybody who likes just smart, subtle, obscure horror, I think they would love it. Even people who just loves retro throwback stuff, I think they would enjoy it. I mean, anybody with an open mind, they would find something about it that they like. I mean, even you yourself said your wife, it's not her type of film, and she found something about it that she enjoyed. I think there's something in there for everyone.
Yeah, there is. This could almost be a gateway horror film in many ways, because it's not extreme, but it still has plenty of horror elements in there that might turn you on to want to seek more. But yeah, it didn't do well. It got a very limited release. Pretty much went to rental. It had a budget estimated of $3 million, and it only was limited to a number of screens. I don't have the exact screens here, but it like released on a day, or limited, one of those limited screenings, enough to where probably to qualify for something. Or in the contract. It was in the contract. Maybe the actors, they had a minimum of however many screens, unfortunately, but it was definitely a staple on the rental shelves for many years, because I remember seeing a picture of it and a poster of it all the time, because it had, like you said, Car, it has that weird where you're walking in the horror aisle, and you're walking past Black Roses and all these other, and all of a sudden you walk past, you're like, well, that's a kind of happy suburban picture that it says parents and kind of blood. You're like,
Yeah,
huh.
what are you doing here?
What? Did this get put in the wrong place or what? But yeah, Parents, check it out, folks. From 1989, definitely worth a watch. I think so as well. And the fact that it's in 50s, if you're worried about it being dated, well, it's set in the 50s and it looks like it's set in the 50s. So it's not even dated. It doesn't feel like an 80s film. It feels like a dark comedy set in the 50s. So, yeah, I dig it quite a bit. And so check it out, folks. So there you have it. Thank you, Infobomb, for always contributing in the chat. I love to hear from you and our viewers. And now, as always, this is where I give my lovely crew the chance for a license to shill. So Kara, please shill away.
I don't have anything new. I'll be back officially in October for Halloween season, but in the meantime, there's tons of old reviews for weirdo and obscure horror on my channel, Horror Retrospective, here on YouTube. So feel free to drop by, check it out. There's tons of stuff to choose from.
Fantastic. And Mr. Simmons, please shill away.
I'm Ian Simmons. You can find me at Kicking the Seat at kickseat.com. I'm also on YouTube. If you look up Kicking the Seat on YouTube, I've got a lot of reviews and stuff coming out this week and next week as we approach the 800th episode of the Kicking the Seat podcast. So,
Wow.
yeah. Well, I'm embarrassed because I think I've done more than 800 episodes, but somewhere along the way I lost my numbering scheme, so I don't even know what the hell's going on my own site. But yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Gee, 800 episodes. Well, that just takes the total wind out of my sails of what I was going to shill.
I'm teeing you up, Mark. There you go.
You are teeing me up. For anyone curious, we are doing an AMA like we always do when we hit a milestone episode. And yes, we are doing Full Moon 400. It's the 400th episode of The Spoiler Room, Friday, August 26th, 2022. 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It will be an AMA as well as a discussion on our favorite full moon features. It begins with F on a Friday, full moon number 400. Get it? Hey, wow. Work with me here. Yeah. But that's what we're doing this Friday for our 400th episode, which again is an episode I never thought I'd ever reach when I started doing this, but it's thanks to wonderful crew members like I have here tonight and wonderful audience like you out there who keep us going. We do have one more Family That Slays Together episode this month, and then we head into September, which will be It's So Lifelike, as we take a look at a variety of films involving art and murder. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Please subscribe and all of that to my lovely crew members stuff here. Hope we see you for the 400th episode. And if not, you can always catch us on the iTunes and all that fun stuff as well. And now, folks, we will just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Nighty night.